Hello, this is Bob Gray Sr. Welcome to Ministry Moments. Lord willing, every Friday, 4 o'clock Eastern Time, we'll come together. And of course, if you subscribe, I hope you will, then you can look at it anytime. Just work it into your schedule whenever you can. I've really enjoyed doing these. I taught for 3 decades the soul winning clinic, and I would suggest you get the church's pastor's church manual. It's been reprinted, updated. It's our third printing, and I promise you'll use those thoughts in there and forever and ever and ever. And it's not just for pastors, but it's for laymen in leadership to help you to understand what the pastor's trying to do and kind of form a team mentality that'll be a blessing to you. Today, I want to talk to you about percentages. Percentages. And so get a pen out, jot some things down. Will not be long. It's going to be a brief one today. Wow, if we're going to get in and get out of here, I'm hungry. I'm going to talk to you about percentages, if you will. So first of all, before I get into it, understand that throughout the Bible, you'll find where God uses a fifth, a fourth, a third. He uses percentages throughout the Word of God. And so, for example, the tithe in itself means 10%. The word tithe means 10%. In Leviticus 27:31, God said, if you're late on your tithe, then you need to add a fifth. And that's not liquor. That's 20%. So you add 20% if you're late. It's very important to understand that God operates and uses percentages. So tithe is 10%. Leviticus 27:31 tells you if you're going to be late now on your tithe, then you need to add a fifth or 20%. So God uses percentages. So as you go through your Bible reading and as a Bible student, and you see that, it kind of help you to remind you of the basis of what God is doing in this matter of not just money, but other aspects of the Christian life. But the fifth. All right, so here we go. Here is the uh, several, like 65 points, 35 subpoints, 3 jokes, and 2 tear-jerking illustrations. Here we go. Number one, the tithe is 10%. The tithe is 10%. We've already mentioned that, but I want to remind you, if you're trying to figure out how you ought to tithe, the tithe is 10%. Number two, in your offerings, use percentages. In your offerings, use percentages. Use percentages. If God says add a fifth if you're late, then I think maybe at a tithe is 10%, and that's the baseline. Then I would suggest to you that if you have on your offering envelope, we have at our church here, we have several columns, several boxes there that you can put an amount in. So when it comes time to the bus ministry, it comes time to missions, it comes whatever it might be, best thing to do is use percentages. Now, you'll need to learn to translate, of course, naturally, those percentages. Recently, our pastor asked us to up our the tithe 10% to add 10% to that. If you gave $200, then your tithe was 20. Then he would want you to add $2 to that, which is reasonable. So he taught us to use percentages, and as I've taught for these 52 years, this matter of percentages. So, number one, the tithe is 10%. Number two, the offerings should be translated into percentages into reality. So the offerings do percent. Every year at the end of the year, I look at my giving and then decide what I'm going to do for the next year. Well, all of that's based on percentages. Number three, this means you'll never cut back. If you use this means you'll never cut back. So 10% is 10%. If your hours, you say you work 40 hours a week and your hours go up to 45 hours, you don't have to figure anything out. Just use the same 10% percentage. If the hours are cut back, I remember a good family, God bless them. They came in with tears one year. I taught stewardship faithfully for all those years, every January. The practicalities of finances and helping the people. And a lot of our houses were paid for when I retired, and they were grateful to me for that. So you'll never cut back. So if hours are cut back, let's say I had a family come in tears and said, we cannot give what we said we would give to missions. And so what do we do? And I said, well, if you'll go back to using percentages, you won't have to worry about it. 10% is 10%. So if the hours are up, it's still 10%. The hours are down, it's still 10%. And if you'll do that with the rest of your giving, do it by percentage, 5% or 7%, whatever it might be on that envelope there, then nothing changes. Nothing changes. You're not in trouble with God, and nothing changes. I like what God said about Solomon. He said, I'm going to bless that old boy. Well, he didn't say that old boy, but if he be constant, that just rings in my ears, if he be constant. Being constant and consistency, God is impressed with that. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. So God, it makes it very clear. If the tithe is 10%, and if you're late on a tithe, you got to add a fifth, which is another percentage. God's laying a pattern, a template down for us on this matter of giving. Talking about percentages now. Number one, the tithe is 10%. Number two, the offerings should be on a percentage basis. The offerings should be on a percentage basis. Number three, this means you'll never cut back. You'll never cut back. Hours go up, percentage is the same. Hours go down, percentage is the same. So you don't have to fret or worry about being in trouble with God or having a curse on you on your finances. Number four, monthly financial reports should use percentages. Monthly financial reports should use percentages. I would have, as everybody, a regular financial report. But off to the far right, I had a column there, a column of percentages. So I translated what the expenditure was to a matter of percentage to the entire income. Now that was very important because of this fact. Laymen, if they pay $100 for electricity every month, they live in that world. Now, if all of a sudden you've got a church that's spending $1,000 or $1,500 on utilities or electricity, it's going to be hard for them to comprehend. But if you translate everything to percentages, then they can grasp that. They can understand that. So when you do that, annual reports or monthly reports, the ones I sent to the bank, I did the same thing. I had percentages off to the right, and I helped the banker to understand that I was living within reality. All right, we're talking about percentages now. Number one, the tithe is 10%. Number two, the offerings should be put on a percentage basis. Number three, this means you never cut back in your giving. You're not cutting back. Hours increased, then you give more, but it's based on a percentage. Hours cut back, you're giving the same because you're giving the same percentage. Now, you need to learn how to translate that if you have commitment cards like we did every year. At the end of January, people would turn in their cards. I wanted them to translate their percentage into an amount, and they could do that. Realizing as their pastor and them realizing that we're talking about percentages on each item that's on that card. Number five, this helps large expenditures to be understood by the layman. This helps large expenditures, I'm talking about church expenditures, large church expenditures to be understood by the layman and put it in perspective. If they look at the percentage and they have in their mind, they understand the percentage aspect of this, then they're going to see and be able to relate whether or not we're doing right by utilities or mortgage or whatever it might be. All right. So we're talking about percentages now. Number one, the tithe is 10%. Using that as a basis now, a foundation. Then number two, then the offerings should be based on a percentage. And now it's up to the layman. If you have a commitment card every January, as we did, or whenever you do it, then they understand they've got to translate the actual income they have on a weekly basis using a percentage and translate that to help us to understand and grasp the matter of missions, for example, or whatever it might be. All right, number one, tithes 10%. Number two, the offering should be used in a percentage basis, or put on the card on a percentage basis. Don't put the percent on there, put the amount, translate it to an actual amount. Number three, this means you'll never cut back. You don't have to worry about, fret about that. Number four, monthly financial reports should use the percentage, and also annual reports that are given. Our banker received a monthly report, and he saw that percentage off to the right. It helped him to understand that I understood. Number five, it helps large expenditures to be understood by laymen. Number six, percentages are like a smoke alarm, like a smoke alarm. So every time we would rotate deacons off, we had 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. Everybody was off for 1 year. Then I would have to explain every year when we started giving out financial reports what that percentage meant on the side, that column, that third column on the side. And let them know that I was well aware if we were getting close to going over that thing, that we have to talk about it. So percentages are like a smoke alarm. And so it warns you that you're about to cross a limit here. And so number one, the tithe is 10%. Number two, the offerings then should be translated on a percentage basis. But on your card each January, put the actual amount down after you've translated it. Number three, this means you'll never cut back. It'll make it so much easier on the members and the laymen. Number four, monthly financial reports use percentage. Have a column to the far right that shows the percentage of every expenditure. Number five, this helps large expenditures be understood by the layman. Number six, percentage is like a smoke alarm. Number seven, here's what I would teach them. I would teach the folks this, and 25%, that's our limit on debt. 10 to 15%, that's our limit on utilities. I'd love to get around 10% or lower than that. It means I have more money for buses, more money for whatever I needed to use it for. So, but 10 to 15, 40 to 45% on administration. Never, ever, and I'd love it if we can get it down to 40%. On administration. That way, I'm not overloaded. I know my overhead. I'm very careful about spending too much on administration, and all this compared to income. And then number eight, last point. Aren't you proud of me? The last point, number eight, it helps members to translate percentages to actual amount. It helps members to translate percentage to actual amount. So if they say, all right, 10%, I'm going to give 10% to the buses, the bus ministry. Well, they know what their income is on an average, so they can translate that into an actual number if they're turning us in and trying to help you in order to be able to come up with a budget number that will help the pastor to be able to do that. All right, we're talking about the use of percentages. Number one, the tithe is 10%. We understand that. Number two, then the offering should be percentage based. The offering should be percentage based. Number three, this means you'll never cut back, and it'll put the members at ease that I don't want to rob God. Let me tell you something. The first money I ever got in my hand from work was a paper route. Probably yours was too. And I remember cashing that check, and I remember putting that money on the kitchen table, and I was greedy. Boy, I was trying to figure out what I could buy with that money. And my mama came in and said, son, what's this? I said, Mama, I got my first check for my paper route. She said, how much you got there? Don't hold me to this number. But I said, $50. Oh, she said, that's good. You working, that's good. Making money, that's good. And she reached down and scooted some money off to the side. And I said, what's that? And she said, oh, that belongs to God. That's a tithe that she taught me. And I thank God for this. I thank God to this day for this. I've never had anything, a penny come through my hand that I didn't tithe off of because of what Mama taught me. And as a kid now, I remember saying to myself, Jesus, that belongs to Jesus. Let Jesus get his own paper route. I didn't say that out loud. I was a stupid kid. I'm still stupid, dumb. But number one, the tithe is 10%. Number two, the offering should be in a percentage basis. Number three, this means you'll never cut back. Number four, monthly financial reports, put that percentage off to the side. It helps the members to grasp the fact, hey, he's staying within that 25% debt. He's staying within that 10 to 15% for utilities. If it goes over that, shut some lights off. This computerized generation we're in, you can set those things where they go on and off. I remember Russell Anderson preaching on a Wednesday night for us. And and all of a sudden the air conditioning went off. It wasn't because we did that. It was because it was on a percentage. By such a time, shut that rascal off. And I remember him sitting there sweating, and he said, "You know, you ought to pay your light bill." And I explained to him what we had done. He liked it after I explained it. Uh, so percentages then, I said number five helps large expenditures be understood by the layman. Number six, percentage are like a smoke alarm. All right. Then teach them the limits. I taught the people 25% debt limit, no mortgage payment above that at all. And and I loved ours about 18%. Then 10 to 15% on utilities. I think ours was around about 9%. 40 to 45% administration. I pushed that one as far as I could. But for administration, but it's a smoke alarm. And the people getting the report now can see the actual, how it's affecting. It's a large amount. Oh, listen, at my height, we had $4.5 million budget. I tell you what, for a layman that's working at a shop at his paycheck and trying to understand that, it's just maybe difficult to understand. But when you use percentages, it makes it clearer. And then it helps members to translate percentage to actual numbers so that you can then establish your budget for certain items. I hope this helped you. Boy, it helped me because it helped our people. They just began to grasp the idea, and it helped them to understand me, what I was doing as pastor, and helped them to understand their world, that they were doing things as it should be done. And they weren't stealing from God or had a curse on them because they had to cut back on their giving. They cut back. They didn't, but the percentage was there. God bless you. I hope this helped you. Minister Moments every Friday, 4 o'clock Eastern time. And you can subscribe. Please subscribe. Get your friends to subscribe. It's very practical. It's not a sermon. I'm not going to preach to you. It's just very practical aspects of the ministry that I believe will be a help. God bless you. Have a great weekend.